Hello and welcome back to the Camera Rolling Podcast. I'm your host Ronnie and this is episode 17. Today we're talking about another Christmas movie because it is December, so I thought we would talk about one of my favorite movies to watch during this time, which is weird that it's one of my favorites because it has an ethical and moral dilemma that just irks me a little bit the more I watch it. The movie I'm talking about is Holiday in Handcuffs, starring Melissa Joan Hart and Mario Lopez. The movie came out in 2007 on ABC Family. I would give a brief synopsis, but I think it gives away a little bit of what goes on in this movie, so let's just get into it. The movie opens almost like a horror movie in that there is a car driving along a dark road in the middle of the night where you can tell that it's been snowy and cold, and we see Melissa Joan Hart pull up next to Mario Lopez's character and say, "Hey, you're not gonna make it very far, get in." And it seems like he's upset, but before we can find out any more information, we cut to the morning before all of this happened. We see Melissa Joan Hart's character, Trudy, get up in the morning, sort of the day before or on December 23rd, getting ready, and she puts in a perm, which I don't know in what universe that ever made sense to put in your own perm, especially when you have straight blonde hair, but she does it anyway. She also decides that she's going to eat leftover Chinese food, but it seems that she didn't pay her gas bill, so she doesn't have any gas to turn on the stove, so she decides to use a hair dryer to the bottom of it. She gets a phone call from her mom that sort of puts into context what she has to do for that day. So essentially her family takes a vacation every year where they try to get away from everyone by going to a cabin in the mountains or in the woods. We learn from her mom that she has a boyfriend that she's going to be bringing to meet her family for the first time, as well as she also has a job interview that her dad set up. You can also tell that there's like a lot of tension between her and her family, that she just tends to be frustrated by the things that her parents say and do. However, this frustration leads to her forgetting that she has the perm in her hair, so when she takes it out, it's extremely curly. But she doesn't really have time to do anything else with her hair, so she slaps a hat on and she gets in her car because she's already late for this interview. When she finally gets to the office she's supposed to interview at, the front desk woman says, "He's not seeing anyone right now, you missed your chance, please leave." And she tries to get to the guy to be like, "Hey, I'm little Trudy, don't you remember me?" But she ends up looking like a fool and they turn her away. So she goes to her current job, which is a waitress at this diner. And at the diner, she ends up looking even more ridiculous. Besides the fact that she has this insane perm, she's also wearing a dress that her mom got for her. Her mom really loves the color pink on her, so it's this bubblegum pink dress, as well as she ends up putting on reindeer ears for her job because it's around Christmas time. However, her day only gets worse when her boyfriend decides to break up with her. This sort of sends her into like a dissociative state, like she is just completely like withdrawing from reality as she's trying to go about like serving people. And then this man comes into the diner. He sits down, she's trying to take his order, not really listening, and just going about her business. However, the tipping point ends up being when her mom calls her and says, "We know that you missed the interview. How could you do this? You've really disappointed us." And so Trudy lies and says, "No, I'm still bringing my boyfriend. Everything is going to be fine. Like, we'll get through this, essentially." However, Trudy doesn't have a boyfriend anymore. Still sort of in this dissociative state and desperate as she is, she grabs a gun that happens to be at the diner. It's like the diner owner's like one of his prized possessions that he kind of like shows off or whatever. She grabs it and then she decides to grab the man that came into the diner, i.e. Mario Lopez. She holds the gun to him and says, "You're going to follow me," and he doesn't really believe her. He's not super scared of her or anything, but when they get outside next to her car, he ends up slipping on ice and he hits his head. So this is the perfect opportunity for Trudy to grab him, put him in the car, and take him with her to the cabin. You heard me right. She kidnaps this man to call him her boyfriend. And somehow this movie is still considered a rom-com when she kidnaps him. But we cut to Mario Lopez's character waking up in the car confused with his hands sort of tied up in a makeshift sort of handcuffs. And obviously he's very upset and confused. Why is this crazy woman kidnapping me? So angry as he has a right to be, he says, "What are you doing? You can't kidnap me. I'm going to expose you. I'm going to get out of here." And she says, no, I have a gun and I'm not afraid to use it. Which he says, I don't think so. But as she swerves to miss a skunk, she almost shoots him in the crotch. So clearly, things are very much awry. Still, as they're driving along, he's trying to figure out what exactly is going on. He says, "Why did you kidnap me? Did you kidnap me because, this happened or that happened?" But essentially she says that her boyfriend couldn't make it and so she's kidnapped him, which really doesn't make any sense. And Mario Lopez's character, David, says, I think you kidnapped me because he dumped you. Either way, there's still a lot of animosity, which is fair. He just got kidnapped. However, when they pull up to a gas station to fill up, she tries to keep it a secret. She's trying to hide him and hide the fact that she has someone in there, so she gets out to pump the gas. But it's kind of like an old school gas station, so the old man inside decides to come out and says, "Oh, I'll pump the gas for the pretty lady." But he sees David in the passenger seat all tied up, and the guy's like, "What's going on here?" And of course Trudy says, it's our little thing, we're kind of kinky pretty much. And he's like, "Oh, okay, I see." And he lets them leave. But not without some fuzzy handcuffs. So now it's getting serious. It's getting real. Now he doesn't have to have his hands tied up like this, but instead he can have them down here because he has real handcuffs. Next, we see them pull up to the cabin, and she decides to get out and leave him in the car so that she can go talk to her parents first. Because obviously, it's not like David is just gonna go along with this. If you've been kidnapped and they're going to show you in front of other people, wouldn't you be like, "Hey, I got kidnapped"? You're insane, right? So Trudy goes in and she tells her parents, "We do this funny little game where he jokes about being kidnapped. So when he starts joking, just laugh and pretend it's funny." So when they go in, they laugh and pretend it's funny. And of course David is confused and wondering why these people are all so crazy. Because, oh my gosh, that sounds insane, but I guess they've never met her boyfriend, so it really could just be a joke. After meeting her parents and sort of getting settled in, realizing that these people don't understand that he's actually been kidnapped, Trudy decides to go to her mom, and apparently they have a keymaster every year. Essentially, when the family goes to the cabin, they have rules about being offline, so they can't have their phones and they can't have their keys to go driving around and stuff. So essentially the keymaster is somebody who keeps all of that stuff safe and in one spot so that other people can't really get to it. And of course Trudy asking this is to keep David from running away. And again, this movie is posed as a rom-com, but think about how sinister it is that she is manipulating this situation so that she can keep this man hostage. And for the sole fact that she wants to impress her parents. Next, we get to meet the rest of Trudy's family, which is her sister Katie, her brother Jake, and her grandmother. They all show up, and they all have their own sort of thing going on. And again, David is trying to explain to these people, going up to her brother and saying, "Your sister's crazy." And he's like, "Don't I know it?" I feel like maybe David is not desperate enough in their eyes, they do not see how desperate this man is to escape this crazed woman. But after meeting the family and no one listening to him still, we end up seeing them in the evening and they are in bed, but they're in children's bunk beds because it's one of those you can't sleep together in the same you're not married yet. But in the evening, while everyone's asleep, David decides to try to sneak out. He looks for the keys, but he can't find any, and this is when we get him walking along the side of the road like we saw at the beginning of the movie. And now we can tell why there's so much animosity when he gets in the car. Because essentially, he had been walking for over an hour trying to get away, hoping that he would find someone or something to help him, but Trudy shows up in the car, and she tells him to get in so that she can drive him back to the house. The next morning, Trudy gets a call from her coworker saying, "Hey, where did you go yesterday?" And Trudy defines what she did as a little nervous breakdown. And she begins to tell her friend, my nervous breakdown led to me kidnapping a man and now holding him hostage. And of course her friend is like, you gotta let him go. That's messed up. You could go to jail. And she's like, anyway. And we don't really see the end of that conversation because, oh my gosh, you are a terrible friend for not just immediately calling the police. Like, I'm sorry. I know we all want to be like, oh, like, this is my best friend, loyalty, but like, bro, you need some help. But in talking on the phone, David sees her outside on the phone, and then they go to breakfast with the mom. Trudy's mom asks, like, why are you wearing the same clothes you had as yesterday? And of course David is like, because I don't have any other clothes. Because I was kidnapped. And of course Trudy's mom laughs again because she thinks it's a joke. And Trudy's like, oh, we accidentally left his luggage behind. And so the mom says, well, I bet my husband has some clothes you can wear. And while the mom runs to get some clothes for him to wear, he decides to chase Trudy around for the cell phone. He's like, I know you have a cell phone, give it to me. And Trudy's like, no. And there happens to be like one of those islands in the kitchen, so they end up running around and around until she finally gets out. I think it's called a mallet. I don't know, but that thing that you use to smash meat, yeah, she smashes her phone. She's like, all gone. But the mom comes back with some clothes, and of course they fit super tight because Mario Lopez is like muscly and the dad is like this dude, this just a regular dude, right? But he puts the clothes on, and the mom finds that she doesn't have like olive oil or something. So she says, hey, husband, can you go to the store and get me some olive oil? I need it. And it seems like in this moment you can tell that like the mom is kind of like demanding and a little bit controlling, and it makes sense why like Trudy might not really get along with her mom. Like that her mom has very high standards for things. Either way, the dad's like, yeah, sure. And of course David jumps in. He's like, oh, I'll run out and get it. I'll go get it. I will drive the car. And Trudy's like, no. Like, you can't do that. Like, he can't do that. He doesn't know anything. And the dad is like, we'll go together. And David's like, sure. I'm gonna go with your dad to get this olive oil. And in the car, David is sitting there still trying to convince the dad that he's kidnapped. He's like, I've been kidnapped. Like, this is not a joke. And the dad keeps laughing and laughing. And oh my gosh, these people are insane. If you switch the music out in this movie, it would be so sinister, to be quite honest. Like, I know it's a laugh because we know that, like, Melissa Joan Hart and ABC Family would never, like, stab this dude to death or, like, lock him in chains. But, like, she very clearly kidnapped him, and it's very clearly a crime. But the dad and David get to the store, and it happens to be that gas station that Trudy and him had stopped at before. So when David gets out, he's like, sir, I need your help. I need your phone. I've got to call someone. I've been kidnapped. And of course, the guy associates this kidnapping with kinky stuff. So he's like, yeah, you've been kidnapped. He doesn't believe David either. Like, if someone comes to you and they seem desperate that they have been kidnapped, and they, like, even if they don't look like they've been beat up or something, I don't know, maybe just listen to them. Meanwhile, Trudy is getting her hair done by her sister, and her sister's like, yeah, this is a really bad perm. I don't know why you did this by yourself, but we'll take it out. We'll reverse this, okay? And thank God, because I did not want to stare at that ugly perm for the rest of the movie. But the two men get back safely, and when they get back, David goes to sit down, but his pants rip because his pants are too tight. Clearly, they are too tight. So the brother Jake offers him to wear some of his clothes, and when they go to get the clothes, David sees that he actually has a cell phone. And Jake is like, yeah, you know, like, I keep an extra cell phone, like, just in case, like, I like to have mine or whatever. And so David is like, please let me use your phone. And he's like, yeah, sure, because, you know, it's phone, right? So David decides to call the woman he was actually meant to meet at the diner, which was his girlfriend. He calls her, and he's explaining, like, hey, I'm so sorry I didn't meet up with you that day. I actually got kidnapped. And of course, as any girlfriend would, she's suspicious. She's like, yeah, okay, like, you can just say you want to break up with me. Like, you don't have to come up with these elaborate lies of getting kidnapped. And he's like, no, I got kidnapped, okay? This crazy woman took me hostage. I'm somewhere in the mountains, okay? You have to believe me because I was going to propose to you. And of course, this woman, who's like clearly like sort of a high class type of prissy lady, she's like, oh my gosh, like, this successful man was going to propose to me, like, we have to find him immediately now. Like, only when like money and like clout was brought into it was she like, we gotta save him. However, Trudy hears that he has a cell phone, and so immediately she is like knocking on the door. She's like, let me in. And when he does, she immediately tries to flush the cell phone down the toilet. But unfortunately, David has already made his call. So someone knows that he's in trouble, right? And Trudy pretty much says, I hope you didn't make a phone call, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, you know what? Since help is on the way, I have decided that I'm going to help you. I'm going to be the best boyfriend ever. So when they figure you out and when you get arrested, it'll be that much better. And so this is when David starts going hard being a boyfriend. He starts talking to her dad about golf and teaching him about golf and talking about business, talking about how successful he is. And of course the grandma is like enamored with him already because he's good looking. At the same time, Trudy and her mom are decorating the Christmas tree and they're putting things up, but Trudy's mom then offers David to put the angel on top of the Christmas tree, and Trudy seems really hurt by this. She's like, wait a minute, you're letting him do it? I always do it. I've been doing it since I was a child. That's my moment. And it's very clear, like, you can see that, like, Trudy is very insecure because, like, putting an angel on top of the tree as like a moment, I'm not saying it couldn't be, but like, that's really sad. But yeah, it's very clear that like she's hurt by this and she's like disappointed that her parents would let him do that because like they don't even know him, but they like him a lot, right? So like they're gonna let him do it. It's supposed to, I think, make us feel bad for her. Like, oh, I understand, like, why she would be driven to, like, kidnap this guy. But please remember, there are so many other mentally ill, mentally unstable people who don't kidnap people. You know? Like, she could have just, like, told her parents she was sick or something. Like, do something. Make some excuses, man, instead of kidnapping someone. And that night, as they sit around the Christmas tree all together, all warm and cozy, they're finished eating dinner and they had dessert. And David's like, man, that was really good. And they're like, oh, you should eat another piece of pie. And he's like, yeah, sure. And her mom immediately looks at her and is like, Trudy, go get him a piece of pie. And I'm like, first of all, ma'am, she's not a maid. But second of all, what? Like, he can't go get that himself? Like, that's weird. That's strange. And when she comes back from the kitchen with the pie, she sees that they have asked David to read, like, the Christmas story book, which again was something Trudy had always done, and she is just so upset and overwhelmed that she leaves. Like, she leaves the room. And of course, David goes after her, and he's like, what's going on? I'm being, like, the perfect boyfriend. And she's like, they like you more than me, though. And he's like, no, they don't. They're your family. And she's like, no, you're like everything that they ever wanted. And I'm me. And it was precisely at this moment just how awful the acting is. Because there's a line where Mario says, like, well, why do you think that? Why would you say that? Like, the way he says it is just so, like, Anyway, they go back to the family and, they're just like, yeah, everything's fine. Like, we'll continue on. And of course, Trudy is still kind of like upset, like maybe a little less upset about the storybook as much as she's like upset about the whole situation in general. And later in the evening, when the mom is like, oh, let's leave out cookies and milk for Santa, don't forget to write like your wish list to him or whatever. So they're writing their little letters, and they're sort of like making fun and poking fun at like the letters, like, this is kind of ridiculous. And David is sharing his, and it's like just a bunch of stuff, like cars and things. And she's like, oh, that's so superficial. And he's like, let me read yours. And hers is like some other stuff, like just things and stuff. And it gets to stop disappointing my parents. And yet again, we're supposed to feel like really sorry for her, like, like, man, she really just feels like she's disappointing her parents. And he's like, you're not a disappointment. And she's like, I just want them to look at me the way they look at you. And I'm like, that's like like, dude, I mean, I get it, but also, bro, like, you can't seriously think that your parents don't love you like that. Like, if they didn't love you, they wouldn't do anything for you. Trust me, Like, there are way worse parents to have than, like, emotionally unavailable ones, right? Anyway, they have like a little bit of a moment where she gets real and she tells a story about ice skating and how like when she was little, she like was ice skating for her parents and it felt like she was the only person in the world. And I don't remember if her brother or sister are like older or younger. Like, I think the sister is younger than her, but I don't know if the brother is older or younger. But either way, it's coming off very middle child. Like, sorry to all the middle children out there, but like, or even like the youngest, but still like it's coming off very much like I was ignored as a kid because I was the middle child and like, there was more stuff going on kind of thing. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but like it's very much like, come on, girly, like you gotta start going to therapy and doing some internal work, because kidnapping people is not gonna solve this. It's not gonna fix this. Meanwhile, David's girlfriend has gone to the police and she's like, my boyfriend is missing. And they're like, like, get over yourself, lady. But she's like, he's missing, you better listen to me. And so we can see it's slowly progressing that, like, the police are now involved and, yeah. But the next day is now Christmas, and they are all up in the morning and, having breakfast and stuff. And the mom pretty much, like, gets everyone together to say, like, the schedule. So pretty much, like, the boys are gonna go chop wood, but then Trudy and, David are going to, like, just hang out and play together or whatever. Like, she really doesn't say that they have anything to do for the day, besides that they're going to open presents at 4 o'clock and they're going to have dinner at 7 o'clock. But they go outside to have some fun, so they, like, play some, like, ice hockey and stuff. And then they also go walking sort of like through the woods or whatever, and they are like sort of talking and again getting to know each other. And this is when Trudy finds out that David actually isn't as privileged as she thinks. Even though he may be like a cool businessman now, he actually didn't grow up privileged. He actually pretty much grew up with pretty much hand to mouth, right? And I guess this sort of puts a little more, like, perspective into who he is as a person, and also it makes a little more sense as to why he has, like, sort of been able to grow in terms of caring about her, and, like, why he's starting to sort of develop Stockholm Syndrome, in my opinion, because, like, he has now, like, stopped fighting the hostage situation. And after that, we see them end up under some mistletoe, and they end up kissing, and of course, like, again, this is just, like, another thing in the story that's supposed to, like, push us into being, like, maybe they are good together, like, maybe they do understand and sort of, like, fit each other. Meanwhile, David's girlfriend has the police, and she's like, this is the diner we were going to meet at, they must know something, the people here must know something. And so it seems like they are hot on Trudy's hot on Trudy's trail? Wow, that's a tongue twister. But we quickly skip past that straight to presents. It's presents time. And while they are getting out presents, we see that David finds Trudy's sort of book of art and he's looking through it, but that'll come back later. But they start to hand out presents, and we get sort of a picture montage of the presents, and it's very clear that the parents have gotten presents for each of their children that is like very indicative of the person that they want their child to be. So when they get the sister a gift, it's a law book. It's about being a lawyer. So some of the B plot of this movie is that her parents have these really high expectations for their children, and like they want the sister and the brother to be like things that they clearly are not. So like the sister, Katie, they want her to be a lawyer as well, but in her mind she wants to open like a yoga or Pilates studio. And when they give Trudy her gift, it's like a sort of like briefcase type of bag that they were going to give her as a present for getting that interview, which obviously she like didn't get the interview or the job, so it just is sort of like lost in that moment. And this is when Trudy sort of starts the discussion of like, why are you trying to like get me to be something that I'm not? Like, I want to be me. And they're like, well, you're not gonna make any money as an artist. Like, clearly you haven't. She's like, I haven't really been given a chance because I've been trying to like fight you this whole time, right? And so like she's finally confronting her parents a little bit more about like her feelings and about like their expectations of her. But again, it's sort of falling on deaf ears. And of course, David is sitting there like, your parents kind of suck for this. And like, Trudy looks over at him like, you see what I have to deal with? You see why I kidnapped you? But he turns and he decides to defend her to her father. And he says, I've actually seen her work and it's amazing. Like, she's an amazing artist. And I think you should like trust her to do well. And of course, everyone is feeling very touched that like Trudy's boyfriend is like sticking up for her and saying nice things about her. And this is when David takes it upon himself to make things even crazier. And he proposes to her. Not technically for real, but he like does it for the vibes, you know? Like he does it for the crowd. Like he's a crowd pleaser and he's like, I'm gonna propose because this will be the cherry on top, right? And I think in his mind, he's like, oh, I want things to be good between her and her family, so I'm gonna propose. But like in the grand scheme of things, if he was like also like, hey, this is my kidnapper, okay? So, like, let's make it hurt even more when you gotta give up this ring. Like, you're gonna look like even more of a loser. Like, you could take it one way or the other. But, like, personally, I think she's gonna be embarrassed enough when she gets found out, but... So, the family sort of celebrates around her, and they're like, alright, now that presents are done, like, we're gonna start on dinner, okay? Like, dinner at 7, right? And Trudy and David sort of have a conversation, and he's like, you know... I saw your paintings. I actually do think they're amazing. And she's like, I'm sorry for putting you through all this. Like, I really am. Like, you know, she's apologizing to him. But I'm like, so then let him go. Let him go. But he comes back at her with like, it's actually not that bad being here. Boy, you have Stockholm Syndrome. Okay? Like, just because your kidnapper is a person does not mean that they are not a kidnapper. Meanwhile, the police are showing up to the co-worker's house, and they're like, where's your friend? What happened to your friend? And she's like, all I know is that they went to a place in the mountains. Like, they're at a cabin, but that's really all that I know. But then we cut back to Trudy and David getting ready for dinner, and David is like just out of the shower and all he has on is a towel, and of course Trudy like walks him by and she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. And he's like, it's okay. Like, it's this weird, like, sexual tension, but, like, then it immediately dissipates. I'm sorry, but Melissa Joan Hart is, like, so awkward all of the time that it's, like, hard to even take the sexual tension seriously. But they are changed and ready for dinner, but he's like, whoa, 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 I've got a surprise for you. I want you to, like, skate for me, like you said in your story, you know? He's doing this little magic moment, right? She's putting on the skates and he just lights everything up with a whole bunch of twinkly lights, and it's just this like beautiful moment where she gets to be the only girl in the world. She still kidnapped him. Also, there is no way that they did not hire a stunt double to be doing all of that ice skating, because I just do not believe that Miss Melissa Joan Hart could ice skate like that. I don't believe it. But after this, it's finally 7 o'clock and it is dinner time, so the whole family sits down to eat dinner, and this is when stuff starts to hit the fan. People just start confessing left and right their true feelings. You've got the sister saying, I don't want to be a lawyer. I actually want to use the money that you have been sending me to go to college. Yeah, I'm going to use that to open a studio. And they're disappointed, right? Then we have the brother who's like, I'm gay. And they're like, okay. And then we finally get the mom and the dad that start going at each other, pretty much being like, I don't like the way that things are. The mom is like, I don't know what's going on with her, but like, however, before everything can really hit the fan, at least physically, the police break in and they're like, what's going on here? Okay? Give him back. Give us back the guy. And they're like, no, that's Trudy's boyfriend. And she actually went by a whole different name. They called him Nick this entire time. So when they're like, let David go, they're like, that's not David, that's Nick. And he's like, yeah, no, my name is David. And Trudy's like, yeah, I kidnapped him. Either way, this was a made-for-TV movie, so there's a lot of, like, fade to black and then just sort of, like, fading in. So that's when we get, like, the fade to black at the end of that scene, and when we fade back in, it is the family sitting in jail. Excuse you. But as the family is in jail, or sitting there in a cell, Trudy's like, I'm so sorry this happened, like, this is all my fault. And the mom's like, did I not do enough? Am I not good enough of a mother to... And I'm like, this is so classic, you know? Being like, oh, this is my fault for not being a good mother. Or, I don't know, just let your daughter take responsibility, okay? Because it is her fault. I mean, you didn't help, but it's definitely her fault, right? But before the family can, like, again, really get into it, a police officer comes and he's like, yeah, they didn't press charges, so you're pretty much free to go. And Trudy is picking up all of her items, and she sees that the ring is there, and she's like, oh yeah, like, I have this ring, it's not mine. But when she gets out, David is waiting for her on the steps, and she sort of, you know, she's like, thanks for not pressing charges, and, yeah. Trudy also gives David the ring back, and before he can really say anything to her besides, you know, like, thanks for not, like, being a bad kidnapper or whatever, his girlfriend shows up and she's like, you have some nerve kidnapping my boyfriend, and they, like, walk away. Then we transition to a few months later at Valentine's Day, and Trudy is sitting back at her diner and sort of talking to the diner friend, and she's looking for a new job, and it seems like life is going okay. But at the diner, Trudy is looking for, like, a new job, and her friend and her are kind of talking, and Trudy's like, yeah, I've kind of given up on being an artist, like, I'm waiting for something that's not going to happen, my parents were right, and it's pretty sad that she's defeated, but at the same time, it's like she was saying that she has no real skills, and I'm like, wow, seems like we're in the same position, and yet I didn't kidnap anyone for Christmas. That's what they should have called it, Kidnap for Christmas. But as she's looking through the papers, she sees the wedding announcement for David and his girlfriend. And this is sort of when we transition to see what David is doing, and he is sort of dissociating as well. He is sitting there with his girlfriend, and she's like all excited, picking things out, and she's like, we're doing this and we're doing that, and I want it this way, I want it that way, and he's like, I really don't care. And when he goes out to get some air, I think it sort of dawns on him that he, like, doesn't want to be in a relationship with that girl, which is fine. Like, it's fine if that experience made you realize that you want, like, someone who's more real and more authentic, but maybe, think for a second about the whole world. 7 billion. Whole world, right? Just think about that first. And then make some choices. Although the one good choice he does make is that he decides to end things with her, his girlfriend. Like, he pretty much says, yeah, I don't think I can do this. But then we cut back to Trudy, and we see that, like, she has some paintings around, and her brother calls her, and she's like, hey, like, you want to come to this gallery that I'm doing? I'm finally getting to, like, show my work, and I want you to see it because I'm, like, super excited about this, but, like, don't tell our parents, right? But of course, at this gallery, like, she's super excited, everything's going great, and her brother shows up with the family, and he's like, come on, just, like, give them a chance. And this is the first time that it seems like her parents are taking her her art seriously, and they're like, I didn't realize like how good you were, I didn't realize that this was something that you could do, but like I believe in you now, and also we're in therapy. And I was like, there you go, you got it, you figured it out. Now if only Trudy could get into therapy, because again, you kidnap someone and nothing happens, just nothing. But towards the end of the gallery opening, Trudy is sort of looking at a painting that she sold. It was the one of her like ice skating, and it was actually a really pretty like painting. Like it was pretty good. But her and her mom are just sort of like reflecting and talking and just like growing as people finally. Like they're having a nice little talk. And as Trudy is going to her car alone at night, she gets kidnapped. Yeah. Someone puts a mask over her eyes and she has been kidnapped. And the next time we see her, she's in this like big lit up space. It's like a really pretty event space, and we see that it's David. And he takes the mask off of her and he's like, look around. And she's like, what are you doing here? Are you supposed to be getting married? Like, isn't something else supposed to be happening? Like, why are you here in my life again? And he's like, I realized you're the one I'm truly in love with, and none of that stuff was ever gonna fulfill me. And it's like, there are 7 billion people. You could date any one of those other people who are grounded, but like, why would you date your kidnapper? No one saw the dilemma with this. But yeah, pretty much he's like, you're the one for me. Also, I bought this art gallery for you, and I was the one who bought the piece, which in that moment, he like rips a sheet off of like the painting or whatever. Like he rips it off to like reveal it. And there are so many candles around. Like, dude, why would you plan it like that? Like, there's just so many candles in that room. Anyway, they kiss and everything's great. And she's like, yeah, there's no perfect life, but there are perfect moments like this one. Let me look at who wrote this. Who wrote this? Ron Underwood directed it, but who wrote this? Who sat down and thought that? Sarah Ensley. Of course this lady doesn't have a Wikipedia page. Oh my gosh, it's ridiculous. The production company was Handcuff Productions. Oh my gosh, they're insane for this. Also, one of the genres is defined as it's a crime comedy. Crime comedy. Guys. This man has Stockholm Syndrome. Get him some help. Get him some therapy, and then we can talk about whether or not he's in love with his kidnapper. Either way, that is Holiday in Handcuffs. It's a crazy story. Like, I really don't know how this movie got made, because that is just so insane. And just, again, like, the ethical and moral dilemma of, like, him falling in love with his kidnapper. Like, I know he wasn't tortured or like hurt in any way, but still, kidnapping someone can cause a lot of like psychological damage. Like, people who have been kidnapped, even if they end up returning home, they still suffer a lot of like anxiety and fear about being kidnapped, about someone just taking them hostage. So like, maybe don't write a story that, like, implies that, like, as long as they don't hurt you or anything, they're okay. Like, no. Anyway, this movie is so weird, and I can't believe that it got made and that ABC Family put it out. They just put out a lot of really weird movies. So, maybe we'll talk about more of them in the future, but for now, and with that, keep watching movies, and I'll see you in my next one.